Do it to the cloud.
Welcome back to another Cozy Cafe chat. Grab your coffee and join us for another philosophical and silly discussion. I'm Aidan.
And I'm Lena. Let's get into it. Today we are going to be discussing self-care. But first, dun, 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 what are we drinking, Aidan?
What are we drinking? Okay, well, I'm drinking my second iced Americano with oat milk of the day. It's funny because Lena and I both were in the same boat where we almost forgot to get our coffee for this conversation because it is a little later in the day. But I'm not ashamed to say, I just will say that this is like my fifth cup of coffee a day today, because I had some in the morning at home, and then I went to a coffee shop and got an iced Americano with oat milk and sat and read and did some stuff. And then I ran errands, and then I was like, oh shit, I drank all my coffee. I need another one. So I went to another place. Both of these local coffee shops here in SLO. I'm in SLO right now visiting my family. San Luis Obispo, if you don't know, I forget, not everyone knows the acronym. Anyway, I got this it's called Nautical Bean. It's a funky little local coffee shop. There's two of them here in SLO. And I was like, I figured iced Americanos have become one of my go-to espresso drinks. And I thought like, oh, I'll just get the same thing so I can kind of like compare them. And they're both really good. I would say that like this one's maybe a little smoother, but the one from the other place I went to, Black Horse, is a little stronger. So, but very good. So that is what I'm sipping on and getting overly caffeinated. What about you, Lena?
That is a mood. So I am drinking, if anybody knows Gregory's coffee, you know from this image. There's one right across from my work, and so I, as Aidan mentioned, forgot. So this is only my second cup of coffee, but
Nice.
I am like trying to put down my caffeine intake. But anyway, Gregory's coffee, it is the Flower Power from there. It's a cold brew with I think it's like lavender extract or something like honey related, and then hemp milk. It's real good.
Wow, that sounds so good. Hemp milk is so good. It's
Yeah.
like, I feel like one of the, I don't know, but one of the future of alternative milks. It's funny because that, I don't know, that little logo or whatever, it looks familiar, but I don't think I know of it because it's a New York place, right?
That's I should know. I mean, it's a chain. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's just in New York though. I guess I can Google that. I'm not gonna Google it. You
You
guys
don't have to Google
if you want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't, to my knowledge, seen it anywhere else. I think it's New York based, or at least like the tri-state area.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very like iconic look.
It's cute. Yeah. I like it. So cute, so quirky.
I'm like acting as if I like designed this.
I know exactly. You're like, yep, look at me with my design.
Okay, well, that's what we're drinking. Let's get into today's topic, self-care.
Self-care, yay. Okay, so we have been wanting to talk about this for a while. We feel that it is always relevant because, as the name implies or states outrightly, self-care is the act of caring for ourselves. Woo! If you disagree with that definition, bring it up with me. Fight me. No, don't fight me. I mean, yeah, there's various different facets of it, but I think it would be cool to start off with just like what we think self-care is. I clearly just said it, but a little more into that of, yeah, like what is self-care as we see it in our current, I guess, cultural context. And then also I think it would be interesting to talk about like what it's not, again, to us and to our understanding, and kind of like some of our own self-care practices. But yeah, like I said, at its most basic, it is the act and I would say practice of caring for ourselves. But that is so broad and kind of vague too. So that's where I think it comes down to the individual's perception and practice of it. But Lena, what would you say self-care is, just like as a general concept and definition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I I agree with your definition, obviously, because it's like I think technically correct,
Yeah.
like literally. But I will say the other piece that I think of when I think of like broad self-care is almost like a source of like regulation, whether that's
Mm,
like emotion regulation, like physical, like basically like the things that you do, the practices that you take on that help you stay in a place of like a positive homeostasis, not like
ooh,
in a negative area, but like or too like manic, but like where you're feeling good.
I love that. It's so interesting because as you started to talk about that, I immediately thought homeostasis, like a
Yeah.
sort of, and then you said it, you were saying that, and I was like, yes. So I love that. Regulation is so huge. And I feel like I have been thinking and reflecting on emotional regulation and like my personal improvements in the realm of emotional regulation recently. So it's all like it's very relevant, and that shows that it's like self-care is not solely like a physical practice, it's like psychological, emotional, cultural too, and then that's all related. um and so something I was thinking about too in terms of what it is, what it's not. I think something that self-care is not, and that it often is, um I guess simplified to be, is kind of like overindulging and
Ooh.
a something that is used as an excuse for neglecting this and that. And that's kind of general. What I mean by that, um is, of course, as we're going to get into, for each person self-care may mean something different. And it also, I think it's important to recognize the role that privilege and luxury plays in it. So there's definitely that we can get into, but I think that it's really easy to basically do a bunch of self-serving shit in the name of self-care.
Mhm.
And that's a balance that's tricky to strike for sure.
Yeah.
But to me, self-care is not, again, like overindulging, like overspending on this and that when we really don't have the means to do that. Over consuming resources that we should realistically not be consuming. And then at the same time used as an excuse to say completely neglect responsibilities in our life that we are capable of completing, like, oh, it's self-care. I just like can't go to work. Again, all about don't go to work if you're super burnt out or feeling ill or need a mental health day. But like that can go, it's again that balance. And then also like a disregard for others, because I think of a particular kind of conversation I had towards the end of college with a friend about another friend. There were friendship tensions there surrounding one of these people's statement of self-care basically being cutting off everyone in their lives, which that could be a whole other conversation. But I think that, a lot can be self-care, and the individual really only knows what and how it works as that. But I think that a lot can be taken to a level that can end up being detrimental to others and to the person who's supposedly practicing this self-care. So that's something I also wanted to bring up. I don't know, what do you think?
No, I completely agree. I'm thinking about, so there's a couple things on that. I'm thinking about like the avoidance piece
Yeah.
and this idea that like if I avoid my problems, that can constitute like something healthy, which I'm
Yep.
not there. Everybody experiences some level of like healthy avoid, right? Like
Yep.
you know, I'm not gonna like go fight a tiger because I see one, right? It's not gonna be like, oh, this is my problem now. I'm gonna like, you know, die by the. I'm assuming also that the tiger's gonna try to kill me. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're cool. But you see what like there's situations where avoidance is necessary, and like I think to a degree it can be healthy. I think a lot of times, especially with like you said, like resources, with like indulging, with also like TV. I say this, I'm very guilty of this. But like that kind of stuff where it's like doing things that feel like they're for your mental health, but in reality actually are just pushing you from like facing things that you will
Yeah.
eventually need to face, right? Like maybe you don't need to now. And I think that comes up with like the interpersonal piece too, because
Yep.
like first of all, that like avoidance to it to an nth degree is detrimental to you. And then when you do it with other people, like what you're talking about, like setting these like ridiculous boundaries, or just not considering other people and
Yeah.
solely prioritizing yourself,
Yes.
that's the piece that like it's first of all, it's not good for other people, of course.
Yeah.
It's also not good for you because you're not actually learning how to like engage with others in a healthy way.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree, because it's like self-care doesn't mean selfishness. And then that's kind of another conversation we can have. And I think we actually talked about this possibly in one of our other episodes, but that like, just the concept of selfishness and how that and versus selflessness and how that could be reframed. But if we're talking about selfishness as a negative attribute, characteristic, practice, self-care is not selfishness, right? Like self-care is something that is done for oneself by oneself largely, but that in my mind is what allows a person to better engage with others and
Yeah.
further their, personal and professional whatever pursuits and like successes. I don't know. I think that it's important to acknowledge that it's not merely, and that's where a lot of issues lie in, I guess, critiques of self-care, especially in our success-oriented society. And this brings me back to our episode about productivity culture and capitalism, and how it's like it's really about there's so many values around what you generate, what you produce, and working yourself basically to a point of burnout. And self-care is an act to counter that. Which brings up the idea for me of self-care as resistance. And I know we've talked about this and wanted to talk about it a bit. And we can get into that, but I kind of, before we do maybe get into those other facets of it, I'm curious. I mean, I kind of already know, but for our audience and just to further discuss it, what would you say, like currently and at this time in your life in the past, what are your self-care practices, I guess?
You know what's
Not,
fun?
I guess. I'm asking. I always say I guess, but what are your self-care practices?
I think it's
Do
so
tell.
because I've been thinking about this like as we were like about to start like filming, and I was like, do I know that I do? Like,
Yeah.
but sometimes I'm like, do I?
Yeah.
I do. I think sometimes, and like I said, I was speaking from experience. Sometimes things like playing video games, I've been
Yeah.
playing some recently, watching TV can be like definitely self-care for me. I think I've been I've moved away from reading partially because school has made it less engaging to read, but
School does
recently I've
that.
been trying to read again, and that I think is a good form of self-care. I've been really getting into recently, and like I want to acknowledge that this is also from a place of like financial privilege to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I can, I'll like try to get a massage, or I'll like buy I've been buying like essential oils more recently.
Oh,
That
yes.
has been really nice. Like even just small things, like if I'm doing something that's like maybe giving me like a little stress, or I just like know that I need to like mentally prepare for something, I'll like light a candle, like sit. I've actually also, which Aiden, you might be surprised by this, I've been like starting to try to meditate more. I haven't done
Oh,
a ton. Yeah, I think I was so resistant to it because it was so hard for me to like sit still.
yep.
Um, as I've been like in my own journey, and also like trying to encourage other people to meditate. I'm like, it's a little
That's so true. You're like, oh, I guess I should practice what I preach.
I guess I should try. And so I've been doing a lot of that, and like a lot of like specifically like visualization meditations have been helpful.
Cool.
Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I will admit that I do fall prey to the oh, let me buy something, or like let me buy food.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
retail therapy.
Sad but true. And like sometimes like it's like things that are like actually going to then help me later. Most of the time, it's just like, oh, I need another shirt. No, I don't fucking need another shirt. Yeah. So I like tried to expand more into things that I think are actually a little more balanced.
Yeah.
Or like stretching, dancing, listening to music, like that kind of stuff too.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you?
That's really cool. That's really interesting. The meditation thing is news to me, but I'm proud of you and good for you. And it also kind of, as it does surprise me, it also kind of doesn't, especially like what you're doing right now with your life, which we should probably give little updates on that later. Yeah, I forgot about that part. So I was I was reflecting on this earlier, and I was kind of grouping my self-care practices into like sort of different facets of life and well-being. And it's interesting because at the end of making this list, because I literally wrote a list, I was like, this begs the question of like, what is self-care after all? Is it everything we do for ourselves? And then I was like spinning off on this like whole philosophical questioning of like just existence, and that was a rabbit hole. But I think that like three really fundamental aspects of self-care for me, and that's why I bring up like, is it everything we do for ourselves to stay healthy and more or less stable, but it's sleep, nutrition, and exercise, which again, those are like doctor recommendations for staying healthy. So, like, is that self-care? But like, yes, it is, because they are literally practices that I'm constantly working on in order to be as often as possible at that point of positive homeostasis. And that are so crucial, but often neglected, and that our society with that productivity culture encourages us to neglect. So I'm a person who needs a lot of sleep, and I feel like I'm constantly working on trying to get more. In college, I neglected too much. Like I neglected sleep for too many years. And it has adverse health effects. And especially as someone with a mood disorder, like that is like sleep is crucial. So sleep, nutrition, eating healthy, and with that, like cooking and knowing where my food comes from. And I enjoy that too. That's the thing. Like there's that piece of enjoyment with it too. Eating a whole foods, plant-based diet. Like that's what makes me feel good and keeps me healthy. Drinking gallons of water. I drink a shit ton of water. Anyone who knows me knows that. And then exercise, like that balance of exercise for health, but also for fitness. And I've been into fitness for a while now, but my relationship with it has changed. So right now, a lot of my exercise comes from hiking, which connects to time spent outdoors, which is like a really big self-care practice of mine. Outdoors, whether that's exercise outdoors, like hiking, or just taking in sun, trying to get that solid 10 minutes of vitamin D a day, minimum 10 minutes, which sadly doesn't even always happen. Like, it's so interesting. So that's why like, that's a big one of mine. So yeah, whether it's that or just like taking in oxygen, being around vegetation, animals, like that kind of thing. And then like quality time. And by that, I mean like quality people time. So having that time with my family, whether it's visiting them like I am now, or talking on the phone with my partner, with my friends, with myself, like alone time. Again, there's a lot of like cliches in this of like me time and all that, but it's all very real. Like they're cliches for a reason. I'm an outgoing introvert, so that's always a tricky balance. So like, and I'm going off like saying a lot here because I do feel like my self-care practices actually have been pretty solid in the past like half a year or so. So I'm like kind of proud of it in a way of like, yeah, there are ups and downs with this, and I do neglect some things sometimes, but I do feel like I have been like pretty on top of things. So I'm like, I'm ready. I got so many. Even a few years ago, I'd been like, I work out and light candles, but like I'm in school. So now I'm like, no, let me tell you about my well-rounded life. But like Lena said, oh my gosh, like scents are huge for me. So essential oils, candles, scents, lighting, and like temperature, like creating a positive atmosphere, like that's so huge. So like I always love having dim lighting, either my diffuser going or candles lit or both, and then having like a temperature that's conducive to like my stability. Yeah, so that's all, like those are all really like different sort of facets of my self-care. And then also it's like finding that balance, you know, like you were saying about like what something, say like buying shit, sometimes that is like a solid self-care practice, but then sometimes it's like, oh, did I need to like like today go to 2 different coffee shops and buy multiple things? Maybe not, but it was fun in the moment.
You can blame it on the
like
podcast.
I think something I've been prioritizing more that I really haven't in years past is like having a better, well, I mean, like skincare is like a big thing for me, and partly because I've dealt with really bad acne for so many years, so I've had to be on top of skincare. But like skincare is something not just for acne, but like healthy skin and all of that, and like hygiene routine, and having that morning and night routine that's very structured, like that is very centering, very grounding for me. And then like the side of creative pursuits like music and art, drawing more for me is huge. And then like, yeah, watching movies, watching TV. And I know that was like a lot, but like with that, I kind of have like another something that this brought up for me, and a question I have of like, I don't know if it's really a question that's requires an answer, if it's rhetorical, but having, I think part of it is kind of having that like dialogue with ourselves of like, is, say I'm thinking of the example of like of watching a show or watching a bunch of movies, having that conversation of with ourselves, or spending money, like is this going to, how do I phrase this, essentially, is this like a beneficial, is this a self-care practice, or is this that overindulging or something that I'm going to regret after? And I'm bringing this up because I'm actually kind of wondering, like, for you, what do you know when you cross that line into like something that's going to end up not harming you per se, but like really not doing shit for you, or you'll regret? Because I'm thinking about it as I'm talking about it, because I have that dialogue with myself a lot. Like I'm sitting on my ass for a few hours staring at the TV. Oftentimes when I do that, it is good because I'm too much of a go person, and I need to just exist and be still. But I'm like, oh, but the screen is bad for my eyes. It's like, shut the fuck up. You're fine. But anyway, that's an example
Also, your
of
eyes are already bad.
literally, exactly. I
Might as
already
well.
have negative 4 point whatever the fuck. I'm like, they're screwed. So that's an example of my kind of dialogue. Yeah, your glasses are really cute. Always cute. So anyway, passing it on to you. Yeah, what do you think about?
I think that's such a good question. Like I've been thinking a lot about this. Like I've been trying to ask myself this question more like, does this like serve me?
Yeah.
And like that's the same question. And I think that the piece that can be hard is, like you said, this like discerning of,
Mm-hmm.
is this something that is actually going to serve me? Because in the moment it almost always seems like it will, because
Yes.
that's kind of like what is autopilot, right? But I don't know. I think that what has been helpful is like checking what I haven't done in a while. So like
Mm.
I find that when I'm like watching too much TV, which, oh my god, I watch so much TV, or like playing too much games, it's like, okay, well, what did I do today? Like, did I like
Yes.
go into the office? That required me to like walk more and like
Yeah.
be outside. Then there are days on the weekends, for example, where I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to play some games, but like I haven't been outside at all today because I haven't needed to get out. So
Yep.
that's the piece
Yep.
of the balance of like, I need that outside time, or I need, time to like sit
Yep.
and read, even like things that I think like aren't off of screens just tend to be
Yep.
less like almost like addictive in a way.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
so it helps to like balance that. The piece that I do want to say though, that I hope anybody who's listening, if anybody is, that
Everyone will be listening.
listen up, people. I want to say that I think it's also important to like not blame yourself or like be mad at yourself for where you're at, because like
Yes.
if you have been sitting and like playing games for like 8 hours and you kind of want to change something, but like I guess my point is like self-blame is not a motivating factor
Yep.
usually. Anything it like furthers the like avoidance because it's
Yeah.
avoiding having to sit in those feelings.
Yep.
And so like accept not acceptance, but like kind of like self-compassion, right? Like, hey, my body is telling me that like I need to play video games all day
Hmm.
today. Maybe I'll try again tomorrow. Maybe, maybe I won't do what I need to do, but like being okay. Cause like if your friend shared that with you, you wouldn't be like, oh my God,
Yep.
like why
It's
are you
true.
doing that?
You'd be
So
like,
like,
that's fine.
well, exactly. Yeah. Like, and I think that's the thing. It's a balance, right? It's like you
Hmm.
want to do things that serve you, but sometimes we're in places where the thing that serves us isn't always the best, quote
Yeah.
unquote, for us, but like you'll get there.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's like guilt is not conducive really to anything in this case.
Yeah.
Because that's what it brings me to is, and I am a person who tends to feel guilty a lot of the time for shit I shouldn't feel guilty for. And so it's like guilt isn't conducive. Like it's really not. And it is, and that's the thing. It's like if you are inclined to, like this example we're using, play video games for 8 hours, that says something too. It's like, what is that indicating about what you're doing that gets you to the point where that's all you want to do, or what you're lacking? So I think it's like it brings up more, and it can bring up more. And balance, like you said, is so key. And that brings us back, because that is, that's what homeostasis is essentially in a very simplified form. It's like a sort of balancing out of things. So within that, it's like self-care has to be a balance and balanced. And I think like I meant to say this when I went on my monologue about my self-care practices, but when you were talking about practicing meditation more, made me think about mindfulness as a whole, and how I think that a way I view self-care and have that dialogue with myself is like from a lens of mindfulness. So it's like, yeah, I can be watching 2 movies in a row. I can't even like be doing something on my phone, like going through my photos or whatever. And that could be like really fun for me in the moment. And for me, it's all about like coming at it from a place of mindfulness, like being aware of what my body is doing. Like, yes, I am sitting on the couch here, and here is my pillow, and this is the thing I'm watching, and I'm intentionally doing it. I think we've talked about it, like intentionality, and like we have the agency too. So I think that that's kind of a lens for it, at least a way I look at it.
Totally. This is making me think, this is, I'm just thinking that like we should also do an episode on mindfulness and because like I feel like
Yes.
we have two very different like journeys with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like we would have a very interesting, because like even what like I agree with everything you're saying right now, but I'm just thinking about like that would be such a cool conversation.
We should definitely do that.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, please do, because I don't think we have like a bullet point for that.
Like a billion other ones.
We have so many. It's gonna be like this is our life's work.
Some of them are so specific too. I'm like, oh my God.
Like Spice and the Great British Baking. Which could be a whole fucking episode. Could be a whole fucking series.
It's gonna be our most watched episode, let's be honest.
Oh, that's so funny.
Okay. I want to say, because we're getting nearer to the end.
Yeah.
Do we want to like wrap up this conversation with self-care as resistance?
Yeah, I was just gonna do that. So, brainwaves.
Yes.
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
I think what it means to me is that if we are to resist a structural inequality, structural oppression, and also like interpersonal stuff, like
Mhm.
stuff that's coming up not just on like a structural level, but like in our day-to-day lives. We need to
Oh,
have like, oh
I
no,
just
did you
spilled my
drop?
coffee all over the ground. Hang
Wait,
on.
can you
Oh
can
my
you
God,
show
this is
us?
kind of perfect. Okay, hang on one moment.
Oh my God. Did she not have a lid? I have so many questions.
This I feel like is just so fitting, like for everything going on.
Did
And
you
that's
not?
the universe telling me, bitch, you need to stop drinking so much coffee. Like you're done.
Are you?
Okay. I'll clean the rest of that up later.
It's
All right,
fine.
continue.
I'm just so curious. Did you not have a lid on it?
So I did, but it was a plastic cup and it's on the corner of my desk. And I just knocked it over with my elbow. Like, yeah, I was probably like, yeah, that's great. And like knocked it over and then whoosh. It's okay. I really did not need more coffee.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I drink way less coffee than you. I still feel like I don't need this, but I'm going to continue to drink it.
Continue.
Oh no, I don't. What the fuck was I saying? Oh, just like we can't like resist like oppression
Yeah.
and change the world with when we're like unable to literally care for ourselves. Like I just think
Yes.
that's the
Yes. I'm
piece.
snapping. I can't snap, but I'm snapping. Like actually can't. that
What about for you?
that's I mean, that's like a lot of what I was thinking I was gonna say. Um yeah, like exactly what you said. But also like I said earlier how it connects to this. It's like it's resisting capitalism. It's essentially resisting the white supremacist
Mm-hmm.
capitalist heteropatriarchy. Like that's the everything in that system basically, that incredibly toxic unjust system
Yeah.
encourages us to keep going, to disregard our own needs and those of others. And that's our system, you know. And so it is like a kind of little, it's a little fuck you to the system, which is so necessary. And exactly, I was thinking about um activism, and in regards to activism, it's like activists need that self-care. It's like in order to be able to continue the fight for equity and equality and all that. Like, you know, it's in a simple form. If we're going to simplify it just for the sake of this example down to like in order to, if what we're doing is like a group of activists marching on the streets protesting, our their slash our bodies cannot physically keep going without taking that time for rest. So that's like a very simplified kind of like analogy in a way. Not really analogy, more like a metaphor. But also part of the act of protest. It's like
Yeah.
that the work has to be offset by that time for care. And so I think it's important to recognize it in the light of activism, and work in general. You know, not everyone is going to be a frontline activist, and that's okay. Like I acknowledge, I know that like as much as I would like to be, I'm not. You know, my forms of activism play out in other ways, and I'm always working on that. And no, I have a lot to improve. But it's like everybody who is part of this toxic economy, this capitalist economy, which is everyone, is prone to so many of the ills of it. And so because of that, it's like we absolutely deserve and need to take the time to like work to offset that. So that's kind of how I was thinking. Yeah, it's resisting this at its simplest yet also complicated. Simplest in the way of just stating it. It's our resisting the toxic system of which we're all a part.
It's so true, and I think the activism piece is so real, and like I also think the other piece of that is like we the more like exhausted you are, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but like the less that you can care for other people and like
100%.
days, and also the less hope that you have. Like I think
Yep.
that like active like the core of any form of change is like hope and belief that something
Yep.
can happen. And I think that people just we become so like dejected and like
Mm-hmm.
and I think when we are exhausted. And it's kind of this hard thing because, like, obviously many people can't, as we've talked about, it's a luxury to engage in certain forms of self-care. So there's nuance there, but I do think that at the end of the day, it's a way to help foster like community and change.
Yep. I'm glad you said that, because that was a point I also wanted to bring up. Yeah. So, and like going back to the guilt too, not feeling guilt for it, because it's like that self-care is part of that balance that will continue to foster the hope and work for change. So yeah, beautifully said. Yes, snaps. I know you only, yeah, you're great. You only have a few more minutes, but did we want to wrap up with some recommendations? Like, do we want to do a check-in the next episode?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, maybe we'll do a check in the next episode.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it'd be better to do it at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like we talked about all this. Oh no, what are you up to? It just seems a little off.
Also, I'm like, I don't think that if I was listening to this podcast, I wouldn't stay to listen at the end. Like I would listen. Like,
exactly. It's like, okay, I don't care what these bitches are doing. Like, yeah.
Like, don't listen, people. Okay, so before we wrap up, it's time for some recommendations. Aidan, what are you recommending for this?
Montero all the way. Okay, so in the past few months, and yes, I say in the past few months because like I was not an OG listener from the early days, i.e. 2019, but I'm a big Lil Nas X fan. I think he's phenomenal. If you haven't heard of him, you have, because he's everywhere. But if you haven't, no judgment, please look him up. He's a huge star right now. Number 9 on Spotify last time I checked. Could be lower or higher, but amazingly talented artist, pop star, hip hop, rap, whatever. He's been called so many different things, but I think very groundbreaking, both in his music and his online persona, and the way that he has been essentially advertising and marketing himself in his music, being an openly gay young Black man, and kind of subverting masculinity norms. Oh, he's incredible. And his music is like fire. So I've been listening to his debut album, Montero, which, fun fact, if you don't know, that's actually his name, his first name. And it's just so good. And I really encourage everyone to give it a listen, because I think he's a very genre bending artist. So I think there really is something for everyone. He has some pretty awesome features on that album too. So yeah, huge pop phenomenon, but I'm gonna rep it because fantastic.
We love it. I love Lil Nas X too. Yeah. My recommendation is a book that I just finished reading literally last night. I was like turning pages so quickly. So the book is Howl's Moving Castle, by Diane Wynne Jones, and it's the book that was adapted into a movie by Miyazaki. So good. For the movie is amazing. I've seen the movie like so many times because it's one of my favorite films. But I haven't read the book yet, and so I just finished reading the book. It's so good. It's also, if you've seen the movie, it's like different than the movie, but really good. It's magic involved. Like there's a lot of like really like good world building. There's romance, which I love. There's like moody people who fight, and I'm like, yes, that's a movie. That's me. There's a lot of representation in that. And it's just like it's really good. It's really good. So I recommend both the book and the movie. And I don't have anything else to say about that. It's beautiful.
That's awesome. Wait, what's it called again?
Howl's Moving Castle. Like howl, like what a wolf does. Yes, like his name. The main character's name is Howl. Everyone.
That's so cool. I'm gonna add it to my list. Thanks for that recommendation, Lena.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Our next episode should be out soon. That's what I'm
We're gonna
saying.
hold out that soon.
Soon.
Yes. Make sure to subscribe and follow us. I guess, yeah, subscribe is a YouTube thing, right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. And follow us on social media. Our Instagram and Twitter is at Cozy Cafe Chats, the name of the podcast. And then our email, if you want to send us hate mail, or if you want to tell us in great detail what you ate for lunch, our email is cozycafechats@gmail.com. I also wrote the password here. I was about to read it out.
Yeah, and
Log into our email, hack our accounts.
We love it. Spread the love.
All
Yeah.
right.
See you later. Yeah.
I couldn't remember who said what.
I don't either.
I think you were see you later. I think
Yeah. That sounds right.
We're gonna commit to that now. We're gonna forget it next time as well.
Exactly.
Right. I'm gonna
Bye.